Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, a psycho Karen mistakes a disabled veteran at Walmart for an employee. She steals his cane and then attacks him with it. Here is what happened. And the title story starts like this. I'm a veteran of the United States Army, and when I got deployed overseas, I had some traumatic events occur. I don't want to get graphic and stuff because I don't really feel like this is the right subreddit for that kind of story. What happened though caused me to go blind and for me to require a wheelchair. You might think this means I would have to stay at home and have everybody around me help me. I could never be like that though, where I just gave up my independence. It took a while to learn how to get things done, but I learned how to manage it. One thing that I like doing on my own is going shopping, and I have a pretty solid method for it. My daughter needs to drop me off, but after that I'm on my own and I enjoy it immensely. Just to get a mental image of how I look to somebody else, I'm sitting in an electric wheelchair with one hand holding both the controls and my service dog's leash. My other hand is holding my cane so that I make sure I don't bump into anything. My lap has a basket for me to put what I need in. Finally, I have a hat that clearly states that I am an army veteran. I point all of this out because I want to now pose a question to all of you readers. If you saw somebody that looked like that, would you even think for a minute that they were an employee at the Walmart you entered? Well, a Karen must have assumed the answer to that question was yes, because about 15 minutes into my trip, I was going down the aisles and feeling around for specific products. With modern technology, I can use my phone to point at things on the shelf and have it tell me what it is. This way, I don't even need to bother the employees too much. When I need a lot of stuff, I will have my daughter following with the cart. This day, I was just looking to get some new socks, something that should have been a simple trip even for me. I of course did not see that Karen was looking at me or even that her little scuff noises were directed at me. I heard her say, "Excuse me?" But again, I never assume people are speaking to me when I'm just shopping at Walmart. Then she tapped me on the shoulder and spoke, which is when I knew that she was probably talking to me the entire time. "Karen, I said excuse me." Me, "Oh, I didn't realize you were talking to me. Am I in your way or something?" I assumed I was blocking the aisle with my chair and she wanted to get past me. Despite her sounding rude, I was ready to just let it happen and get back to my day. "Karen, I wanted to know what aisle the diapers were in. I've been standing here waiting and you just ignored me." Me, "Oh, I don't actually work here. I'm not sure where the diapers are." "Karen, how dare you lie to me just to get away with being lazy? If you don't know, then you clearly are not doing your job. You need to go and find them for me because I'm a paying customer." Me, "I'm a paying customer too. Again, I don't work here." "Karen, what are you, deaf? I told you to go and find them for me. Don't use being in a chair as an excuse to be lazy and not help customers. Do your job." Me, "I'm not deaf actually, I'm just blind." You might be the deaf one if you cannot hear me say that I do not work here. I'm a customer just trying to shop. I pointed out my cane and I think she finally also realized that I had my service dog with me. "You cannot bring that filthy animal in a store. You think you can do whatever you want and no customer will tell your manager on you, huh? You're disgusting." She grabbed my cane out of my hand before I could stop her. Then she started hitting me with it and my dog was going crazy. He barked until other people showed up and what I heard was just chaos. The hitting stopped and I felt somebody put the cane back in my hand, but there was a ton going on. The next thing I heard was security talking to me and trying to find out my side of the story. I told him what happened and asked if Karen was still there with us. She wasn't though, and instead got taken into the security office where she continued to insist that I worked at Walmart. I found out later that her logic was that all veterans ended up working at Walmart because it was the only job that we could get. I was just relieved I didn't get hurt during the entire thing. I also learned that my daughter did not just leave me at the store like I always assumed she did. It turned out that she was always come in the store and sit at the Starbucks that is attached until she could see me getting ready to check out. Then she would go back to the car and be ready for when I told her that I was done and ready to go home. It was honestly one of the most heartwarming things any of my kids told me. Either way, when my dog started barking, she heard and ran over to see Karen hitting me with the cane. It turns out that she grabbed Karen by the hair and yanked her to the ground. I've never been prouder of an act of violence in my entire life. She is such a caring person, I was amazed that she even had it in her. The manager of the store also came over and started apologizing like crazy, which I shut down right away. He did not do anything wrong and I was not gonna try and hold the store responsible for what a crazy woman like Karen did. I was asked if I wanted the police called on her to press charges for assault and battery. I said yes, and I had to wait around for them to arrive. While I cannot see faces, I can gather a lot from somebody's tone. They started to ask who was getting assaulted, and when their voice tone changed, I could tell they had seen me. I told them straight up that I wanted to file the report and have Karen arrested. They were more than willing to do that, as anybody hearing what Karen did was disgusted. That included the judge a few months later that made her spell out the entire situation. She had to admit to stealing the cane of a blind man and beating him with it because I did not actually work at the store. She did not have any remorse and said I should have helped her anyway, even if I didn't work there. That I was a servant of the country because I was a veteran, and that meant I had to help anybody that asked for it. Her lack of caring or remorse caused a judge to give her a harsher sentence than he had to for a single charge of assault and battery. She was sent to jail for what she did, and the Walmart also banned her for life. Sucks for her because that was the only Walmart within an hour drive. And the next one is a malicious compliance story. I used to work for a security alarm company in their dispatch office. I would get signals like burglary, fire, silent panic, or maintenance needed notifications and follow our policy on responding. One of the highest priority alarms are silent panic alarms like you might have at a bank or a jewelry store. In this case, I believe it was a small business jewelry store, and the thing about panic alarms is that we have very strict rules on how to respond. If someone calls, verifies their identity and gives the cancel code, we cannot just cancel our immediate police notification. We don't know if someone is holding a gun to their head or otherwise threatening them, and unless an account has specific instructions to do so, we never call anyone but the police, not even the account owner, until after the police are done. So one day, a man calls in because his alarm system won't arm. He's getting a troubled signal, just a low battery from panic alarm number 2. His system won't arm until that troubled signal is cleared, and we usually suggest people have spare batteries on hand, but it seems he didn't feel that was necessary. I let him know that we can send our on-call person out, or he can try picking up supplies from a battery store. However, he just wants to go home. He's getting very frustrated, but there's genuinely nothing I can do from my end to bypass a panic sensor and arm his system like he demands. Eventually he says, "I'll just frickin' smash it and go home." I try to tell him that that will set off the panic alarm. He uses some loud and unkind language and then he hangs up. Then, seconds later, panic number 2 is triggered. Per our policy, I called the police, gave them dispatch info, and then sat back and felt very pleased with myself. It continued to feel kind of great even 5 minutes later when he called back, infuriated that the police had shown up to his store for a panic alarm. I explained to him that something set off his panic alarm and we must respond to all of those with the same urgency, since we never know what's happening on the other side. He was not pleased, but eventually we were able to reach our on-call tech to fix the panic button, which not only had a lot of battery but now physical damage that required it to be replaced. And the next one is a pro-revenge story. So my dad had worked at the same company for almost 30 years before he was abruptly fired for complete BS. He was coordinating an upcoming meeting of people who had to fly in from around the country. One important participant resigned unexpectedly, so my dad cancelled the meeting via email and explained why. Apparently that counted as improperly communicating privileged info, and he was fired the next day. All of this happened a week after my dad's boss retired and was replaced by a new guy who wanted to cut costs. What a coincidence. This was about 10 years ago, near the height of the recession. Dad was in his 50s, had not interviewed for a job since the early 1980s. He was not sure that he would ever find another job. My mom went back to work at a school to pay the bill, while my dad brought together what he could, doing some crappy online consulting gigs for basically minimum wage. They managed to keep their heads above water, but only barely. My dad was out of work for a year and a half and he finally landed a job at a new company 3 states away. Coincidentally, about an hour away from where my wife and I lived, and we were expecting my dad's first grandchild. So mom and dad moved to live about 20 minutes away from us. They had paid off the mortgage on their house, so they decided to keep it, rent it out, planning to retire there in a few years. Also, new company treated my dad very well. better salary than he would make at the old company, good benefits, and respect from his coworkers and superiors. A year later, mom and dad were able to buy a second, smaller house near their grandkids. My dad mentioned a few things about his time at old company to his new bosses. Nothing confidential or anything, more like overall strengths and weaknesses. Of course, the story of how he got fired came out as well. It turns out that when you work at a company for over 25 years, you learn a thing or two about how it works, and cutting costs by firing experienced employees can make your company vulnerable. New companies started to get very interested. They saw an important business opportunity and also a chance to get revenge on behalf of a valued employee. A couple years later, new company bought old company. They were both big companies, and mergers of this size take time, but when the dust settled, it was clear that there were redundancies, divisions and products that both companies had that new company only needed one of. They kept as many of old company's people as they could, and very few lost their jobs. Except of course for the people responsible for firing my dad. The new company put my dad in charge of the building he used to work in at old company and let him choose his employees from both the old and new companies. Dad had to move back to the old state, so new company helped sell his house in the new state and gave him a moving stipend of several $1,000s. Mom and dad were just moving back into their own house. They sold their new house that they would make payments and improvements on for 5 years for a nice profit. With that money plus the moving stipend, they paid off debts, saved for retirement, and took me, my siblings, our spouses, and the grandkids on a cruise. Edit: since people are asking, I never heard exactly what transpired when the guy who fired my dad got downsized. But since it is Christmas, I'm actually able to just ask him. My dad wouldn't say exit interviews are supposed to stay private. I told him about this post with all the names left out and that people wanted to know. He just grinned and said, that would be improperly communicating privileged info. And the next one is a family am I the a-hole story. My stepdaughter's mother's house is very different from a normal household. She's very much a bare minimum kind of person. The only truly important things are work and school and appointments. As long as you are on time for those and doing well, have good hygiene and are keeping your bills paid, everything else is pretty much optional and usually not worthwhile to do. Their house is 3 bedrooms, but it's small, and unless they happen to have a guest, it's just her and her mom. My stepdaughter's mother has a maid service come in once a month to do a clean because she is too busy with a standard 9-to-5 job. Her standards are basically just pick up after yourself, laundry once a week, do the dishes as they come in, and sweep and vacuum if you think it needs it. In an actual family, these standards would lead to the house being an absolute dump, but because her house is all of 2 people, the house is perfectly fine. Our family has 11 people when my stepdaughter is here, my husband and I, our other 4 kids, my sister and her son, and my parents, so we run our household very differently. We have things like routines and chore lists, and aside from the past year, we have kids in sports too. I'm sorry that we don't have a private bathroom for each person in the house and that we have actual tasks that need to be done in the house every single day and cannot just get done tomorrow. She has never adjusted well in transitions and thinks we are just strict for having actual standards. I'm sorry, but things are just not the same when it's 2 people versus a family of 10 to 11. It's not just do whatever like it can be with 2 people. So, after years of arguments, I finally snapped and I told her that I'm sorry she has to spend so much time with an actual family, and now everyone is mad at me for not going along with the idea that a single woman with 1 part-time child is just as much a family as a large multi-generational family. I'm sorry, but it's just not, and I'm tired for being the bad guy. And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know what you think about this story in the comments. Do you think OP is the a-hole or not? Comment number 1, wow, you're a massive asshole. I'm a single woman with 1 child. Are we not a family? Were we a family before my son's dad died and now we are not? How does it work in your eyes? You're the a-hole, and to say that to someone's face, you're an even bigger a-hole. Comment number 2, you're the a-hole. You don't get to gatekeep what a family is. What a trashy thing to say to a child. And for the record, 11 people living in a house of undisclosed size, there's not that many houses that can actually hold 11 people. It's just called overcrowding. You need to get out of your delusional headspace if you truly think your household is normal. It's definitely not. I'll happily live in my 3-person household. It sounds a hell of a lot better than living with such a miserable, spiteful, judgmental person as you. Comment number 3, you're the a-hole. Just because you are a control freak, it doesn't make you better. It sounds like having a family of 11 is an objectively worse quality of life experience for everyone involved. Instead of admitting and being honest with yourself and your stepdaughter about the drawbacks of your current living situation, you are claiming that somehow your family's difficulties make you a real family and people who don't do things your way are not legitimate. This is utter nonsense. I get that's the life you've chosen, but honestly, it doesn't make you superior. If anything, it seems like you have stretched resources thin for your family and created a situation that requires greater than average effort and structure to keep things running smoothly. Again, that's okay, but ask yourself, how would you feel if you were the stepdaughter in this situation? One home life has a caregiver whom she knows and has a steady relationship with, who loves her and doesn't seem to place unreasonable demands. The other is a woman who has 11 other people she has to manage, who likely have not developed as close of a relationship with the stepdaughter. Then this house has not only likely offers less love, I'm guessing this because of the truly disdainful way you speak about your stepdaughter's mom, but it also requires more effort. Have you done anything nice for your stepdaughter to make her feel welcome? Does she get any of the perks of a large family? In other words, greater camaraderie and support, or are you just expecting her to enter into a situation with more chores and less attention and be happy about it? I'm not saying she doesn't have to help out, but to be honest, it sounds like she is going from a relaxed situation with an intimate caregiver to getting lost in the shuffle and being yelled at. Also, the standards you describe for the other family sound normal and safe. I would not be surprised if you were not in fact being overly strict. Also from the sports vibes and the large family, I also have to ask, is there equal division of labor between the men and the women in the household? Do the boys go off to hockey and she's stuck doing their laundry? Your deep judgment of the single mom's cleaning habits lead me to believe that there may be some internalized misogyny here as well. Since she is a minor, you can tell her to do whatever, but if you hold so much disdain for her and her mom, who seem fine, you cannot expect her to actually respect or listen to you. Massive, you are the a-hole. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. This story takes place in the mid-2000s. We still had a landline and live in a small, fairly rural community. It began with us occasionally getting calls from debt collectors for someone or another who we didn't know. It's happened in the past a few times and usually only lasts for a few weeks and then dies down. This time though, it was different. It was getting more frequent and we were getting mail for the same person and the debt collectors were getting more insistent. It also went on for months. At first we would just tell them that we didn't know the person and then hang up on them. But as time went on, they would occasionally threaten to come by and take our stuff. We eventually started daring them to come by after we learned that they didn't really have any power to do anything to us, and telling them we would just call the police and get everything squared away and show them that we were telling the truth. As far as we know, no one ever came by. It's a 3-hour round trip from where the 3 collection agencies are. The mail and phone calls were getting more frequent and more forceful. We tried threatening them with legal action when they would call. We called the police on them when they would make excessive threats, which did nothing whatsoever. When a second name started popping up regularly, I decided to send a certified letter listing our phone numbers, our address, our names, and stated that neither of the people they were regularly looking for lived here. Also, that we didn't know them and had no way of contacting them. I also threatened to file criminal charges against the agencies for harassment, then sent its signature required upon delivery, which made sure there was a paper trail proving that they received it. I expected it to take a week or two and a couple of repeat letters for the other collection agencies, but the contacts ended a couple of days later, all contacts stopped later from everyone, and to this date we have not had a single contact from any of the collection agencies. Fast forward almost 10 years, a coworker and I are driving back and forth quite a bit for a job and spending a lot of time in the truck. So we talk about quite a few different things and I wind up starting to tell him the story above, and he just starts laughing hysterically, bids me to continue, and I do with him, chuckling every now and then. If you remember, I live in a small town. After I tell the story, he tells me he knows more of the story's beginning from where I left off. One of his friends got a job at a lending agency that was better than a payday loan office, but not as high up as a bank. 2 days after starting, the FBI rolls in, seizes all the computers and all of the financial records, etc., and closes the place down for a month. Apparently one of the people working there was an inside person on a scheme to keep getting loans even with bad credit and deferring the calls and letters to someone else. I was not the only one getting harassed. Also, apparently, my letter got the collection agencies to get together and find out what was going on, which ended up with a phone call to the FBI and winding up with a few people going to jail for fraud. My intention was just to send a grenade to the collection agencies with instructions not to pull the pin, and wound up with a mushroom cloud somewhere else. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.